Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something that's both super familiar and kind of baffling?
Oh, yeah.
Teamwork? We all know it's important, right?
Right.
Like essential for achieving big things.
Right.
But then why does it often feel so hard, like we're fighting some invisible force?
It's true.
Well, you, our listeners, sent in a ton of research on this.
A lot of interest in this one.
And it seems you're especially curious about this tension, this push and pull between what we want as individuals and what's best for the group.
That's the big question, isn't it? How do we balance that?
Exactly. And we're going to tackle that head on.
Love it.
But first, I got to introduce the amazing expert who's joining us today, someone who's dedicated their work to understanding the complexities of teamwork.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here and dive into this.
All right, so let's lay it all out. Our mission today is to figure out why teamwork, despite being so crucial, can feel like such a struggle.
Like, why can't we all just get along and row in the same direction?
Right. And we've got a mountain of research to dig through, stuff from evolutionary biology to psychology.
Oh, and even some economics and sociology sprinkled in there.
So we're going to look at it all.
The whole shebang.
But we're not stopping at just describing the problem. We want solutions, actionable insights you can actually use.
Absolutely.
Whether you're leading a team at work, collaborating on a project, or just trying to navigate family dynamics.
All those tricky group situations.
So buckle up because we're going deep, starting way back at the dawn of humanity.
Okay, back to the cave dwellers then.
You got it. I'm talking cave paintings, woolly mammoths, the whole deal.
I'm picturing it.
Could it be that our struggle with teamwork is actually hardwired into us, like from an evolutionary standpoint?
You know, it's a fascinating idea, and there's actually a lot of evidence to support it.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. For our ancestors, survival was often a solo mission.
Like every man for himself.
Right. Hunting, gathering food, avoiding predators, all of that.
So being a lone wolf was the way to go.
It was. The skills that really mattered back then, those were mostly individual skills.
So in a world of saber-toothed tigers and limited resources, looking out for number one was the key to survival.
Exactly. Those who were best at fending for themselves, they were the ones who lived to pass on their genes.
And teamwork, maybe that was more of a liability back then.
In many cases, yeah. Sharing resources or relying on others could put you at risk.
Wow, that's a pretty wild thought, that our brains are still carrying around this ancient programming.
It makes sense, though, doesn't it?
It does, but it also makes you wonder how much of that wiring is still affecting us today, even when we're not running for mammoths anymore?
Right. Like, are we still stuck in that me-first mindset, even when we're in the boardroom or trying to collaborate on a creative project?
That's what I want to unpack. How does that ancient instinct, that need to survive, how does that mess with our ability to be good team players today?
Well, it plays out in some fascinating ways. And a good example of this is something called the tragedy of the commons. Maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah, isn't that like about overfishing or something?
That's the classic example. Picture a shared fishing ground, right? Each fisherman, acting in their own self-interest, tries to catch as many fish as possible.
Makes sense on an individual level.
Right. But here's the catch. If everyone does that, the fish stocks collapse and nobody wins in the long run.
Oh, so it's like they're all acting rationally from their own perspective, but collectively they're creating a disaster.
Exactly. It's a perfect illustration of how prioritizing individual gain can undermine the well-being of the whole group.
Okay, I'm seeing the connection to teamwork now. So how does this tragedy of the commons thing show up in, let's say, a team working on a project at work?
Think of it this way. The commons, in this case, is the shared goal of the team.
Like finishing the project successfully.
Exactly. Now, imagine team members driven by those individualistic instincts we talked about.
Me first programming.
They start prioritizing their own wins, maybe hoarding information, taking all the credit, not sharing resources.
Sounds familiar.
And pretty soon, that shared goal, the project everyone's supposed to be working towards, it starts to fall apart.
Oof. I've definitely been on teams like that.
It happens. And it's not always about people actively sabotaging the team either.
Sometimes it's more subtle.
Yeah, even seemingly harmless behaviors like not speaking up when you disagree.
Or downplaying your own contributions to avoid conflict.
All of that can contribute to this tragedy of the shared goal.
Wow, so even if we're not consciously trying to undermine the team, our brains might be doing it for us.
It's like we're wired to compete even when cooperation would be way more beneficial.
So we're basically walking around with these Stone Age brains in a modern world trying to make teamwork happen.
It's a hilarious image, but it's kind of true. And it's not just our ancient wiring that's tripping us up. We also have those pesky cognitive biases to deal with.
Oh, yeah, those sneaky little mental shortcuts that often lead us astray.
And those can really wreak havoc on teamwork by warping our perceptions of ourselves and others.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about how these biases sabotage our attempts at collaboration.
Well, let's start with one that's particularly relevant here. Attribution bias.
Ooh, attribution bias. That sounds juicy. What is that exactly?
It's this tendency we have to take credit for our wins.
Well, like, oh, yeah, that success was all me.
Exactly. But when things go wrong,
We blame external factors. It was someone else's fault or the system's fault, anything but our own.
you got it. And you can see how this would be a recipe for disaster in a team setting.
Yeah, everyone taking credit for the good stuff, but no one taking responsibility for the bad.
It creates this blame culture, breeds resentment, and makes it almost impossible to learn from mistakes.
Wow, that's powerful. And I have to admit, I've definitely fallen into that trap myself.
We all have. It's a very human tendency.
Okay, so we've got this ancient wiring pushing us to prioritize our own survival, and then these cognitive biases distorting our view of how we contribute to a team.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even talked about the systems we operate in, the structures that often incentivize individual achievement over collective success.
Okay, hold on. So you're saying it's not just us, it's the systems too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And those systems can be a major obstacle to effective teamwork.
All right, I'm definitely sensing a theme here, teamwork. Way harder than it looks.
Oh, yeah, way harder. But don't worry, we're going to dig into all of that after a quick break.
Yes, stay with us as we unpack how the very structures we've built can sometimes sabotage our best collaborative efforts. All right, we're back and ready to tackle how those big systems we live in, how they can actually work against teamwork.
Yeah, it's like they're set up to reward going it alone, even when everyone knows we need to work together.
It's wild. So how does that play out? Like, give me a real-world example.
Let's take a company, right?
Okay.
Imagine they're obsessed with short-term profits.
Okay, got to hit those quarterly targets.
Exactly. Maximize shareholder value, make sure the execs get their bonuses.
But isn't that like how businesses are supposed to operate?
It's common, that's for sure. But the problem is this intense focus on individual gain.
Meaning?
It often comes at the expense of the collective good, both inside the company and out in the world.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties back to teamwork.
Oh, it's totally connected.
But can you, connect the dots a little more for me?
Sure. So this company, they prioritize individual sales targets above all else.
So it's like every salesperson for themselves.
Pretty much. They're hoarding leads, undercutting their colleagues, just trying to close deals and boost their own numbers.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It can be. And what happens to team spirit in that environment?
I'm guessing it goes out the window.
It evaporates. Trust disappears, resentment builds, and you end up with a bunch of people working against each other.
Even though they're all supposed to be on the same team.
Exactly. And the company's goals, those suffer big time.
So it's like that tragedy of the commons idea again.
You got it. Only instead of a fishing ground, it's the company's success that gets depleted.
Because everyone's so focused on their own little piece of the pie.
Right. And the long-term consequences, they could be brutal.
Like what?
Talented people burn out and leave,
Yeah.
innovation stalls, the whole culture becomes toxic.
Sounds awful.
It's not great. And this short-sightedness, it's not just in the corporate world.
You think it's happening on a bigger scale, too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Think about political systems, how they can get hijacked by lobbyists pushing narrow interests.
Instead of what's good for everyone.
Exactly. Or our economic model, how it's so often focused on endless growth, even if it hurts the environment.
It's like we built these complex systems, and now they're running on autopilot, even if they're headed for disaster.
Powerful image, right? And it underscores the need for change, for rethinking how these systems work.
But we can't forget that systems are made up of people.
Right. Individuals making choices.
Which brings us to leadership. Can't talk about teamwork without talking about leadership.
Absolutely crucial. I mean, we've all experienced how a bad boss can completely wreck a team.
Oh, tell me about it. I once had this manager who was obsessed with individual performance metrics.
Like it didn't matter how well the team was doing as a whole?
Nope. As long as everyone hit their individual targets, that's all he cared about.
What was that like for the team?
It was rough. Everyone was so afraid of sharing information, didn't want to give anyone else an advantage.
So much for collaboration, huh?
It created this atmosphere of suspicion and competition.
Even though you are all supposed to be working towards the same goal?
Yeah, it was like the system itself was designed to pit us against each other.
And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People start acting in their own self-interest because that's what's rewarded.
It was exhausting, honestly. It felt like we were all running on treadmills but going nowhere.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
becomes transactional. It's not about how can I contribute to the team's success. It's about what can I get out of this for myself.
So is that it then? Are we doomed to work in silos forever?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we've unpacked some serious challenges here.
Evolutionary baggage, cognitive biases, systems working against us.
The whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But there's also this amazing human capacity for collaboration, for working together to achieve incredible things.
Okay. So there's hope then.
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
Yeah.
by understanding these deep-rooted patterns,
All the stuff we've been talking about.
by understanding that, we can actually start to shift the paradigm, create environments where teamwork can flourish.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some concrete steps we can take to make that happen?
That's what we're going to explore. Real-world examples of how people are finding creative solutions to these challenges, building a more collaborative future.
All right, we're back. And I gotta say, after that deep dive into all the obstacles to teamwork, I'm feeling, well, a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, isn't it? All those forces working against us.
It kind of makes you want to just give up and work in a silo forever.
I get it.
But before we do that, I'm really curious to hear about those creative solutions you mentioned.
Oh yeah, the good stuff.
Because there must be people out there proving that real collaboration is possible, right?
Absolutely. It's happening all over the place, from small communities to global movements tackling huge issues.
So it's like a glimmer of hope amidst all the challenges.
Exactly. It's like people are waking up and realizing that we can achieve so much more when we work together.
Okay, so let's start small. Give me an example of teamwork thriving at the grassroots level, like in everyday communities.
Well, think about community gardens.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
People come together, right?
Yeah.
Sharing resources, knowledge, labor, all to grow fresh food for their neighborhood.
Instead of everyone just toiling away in their own backyard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the food either.
It's about the community aspect.
Exactly. It builds social capital.
People connecting, learning from each other.
Right. Building trust, figuring out how to communicate effectively, recognizing the value of different perspectives.
And that sense of shared purpose, working together towards a common goal. That can be really powerful.
Oh, incredibly. And it's not just a feel-good thing either.
Really?
There's actually a ton of research showing that communities with strong social ties, they tend to be healthier, happier, more resilient.
So it benefits everyone, both the individuals and the community as a whole.
A win-win.
I love it. Okay, but what about those big, hairy global issues? Is there any evidence of that kind of collaborative spirit making a difference on a larger scale?
Oh, for sure. Look at the movement to fight climate change.
Okay, yeah, that's a big one.
A massive challenge, right? And it's not something any one country can solve on their own.
It requires global cooperation.
Exactly. And we're seeing unprecedented collaboration between scientists, policymakers, businesses, activists all over the world.
So they're finally realizing that pointing fingers and clinging to national self-interest just isn't going to cut it?
Nope. This requires a collective effort, sharing knowledge, resources, technology.
And it's not just top-down either, right?
Yeah.
It's not just governments and big institutions.
Oh, not at all. We're also seeing a surge in grassroots movements, people coming together to demand action, hold leaders accountable, create solutions at the local level.
It's like there's this growing awareness that we're all interconnected.
That's it. The well-being of one is linked to the well-being of all.
And that realization, is that what ultimately fuels true collaboration?
I think so. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into teamwork, I'm feeling a bit more optimistic than when we started.
Me too.
We've unpacked a lot of tough stuff.
Evolutionary baggage, cognitive biases, systems that often work against us.
But it's also clear that we humans have this incredible capacity for collaboration.
We do. We just have to tap into it.
And maybe, just maybe, by understanding those deep-rooted patterns, by choosing to collaborate, by demanding that our systems actually support teamwork, we can create a more collaborative future.
I believe we can. It starts with each of us, recognizing our own biases, challenging those competitive systems, and celebrating the wins, both big and small.
This has been an incredible journey. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about teamwork.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought, maybe some inspiration to be a better teammate, and a little bit of hope that a more collaborative future is possible.
Keep diving deep, everyone.
And remember, teamwork makes the dream work.
This is DigitView.